Good morning.
We played at the same time that time.
Yeah, we did. It was total jinx. I think if I said jinx in front of Rio, he'd be like, what is that? Who was it that I said the other day? Oh, at Timothy Ministry, they asked me, tell us something that you don't know about us, that we don't know about you. It was like a teacher spotlight that they did. And I said, I interviewed Betty White. And they're like, who? I'm like, oh, I'm so old.
I know.
Yeah,
like, it's really scary for me to see things in an antique store that I played with growing up and stuff.
Or maybe we used growing up. House,
I don't feel like an antique. But.
Oh, I love it. So Valentine's is coming up. Yes. And I thought, you know what? I did not want to do a typical Valentine's Day message or questions. Instead, I wanted to choose or focus on a different type of love. Something that's different. And you moms are probably like, oh, okay, the love of a child. No, it's actually going to be the other way around. Let's talk about the love for a parent. Now that we are moms, now that we are parents, officially, we got the title right. How can we love and support our aging parents while we have the role of wife, which I know you say always, it comes first, and then the role of mom. And I don't want to use that word balance because I remember one time, and I think I shared it a while ago, Christine Kane gave a great sermon one time. And she said, if we're balanced, that means we're not moving. And I was like, oh my goodness, she's right. And she says, God doesn't want us to just freeze. He wants us to move. So I don't want to use the word balance. How do we balance a perfect life? No, it's never going to be perfect. And we're not going to ever be balanced because the Lord doesn't want us to be frozen. How do we execute properly the role of being a daughter before our parents pass away, while being, executing the role that God has for us as a wife and as a mom?
That's a tough one. And I call that one walking on the cracks, walking on the, because you have to be careful where you step. You are what they call the sandwich generation. You have your own children and you have your parents, and your first obligation is obviously to your husband and then to your child, but you do have to honor your parents. And it is a tricky thing because you do want to love your parents, especially as they age and get sick, and they will need you periodically. So the important thing to do is to do things for them that they like, give them X amount of time, make sure that you check in on them, make sure that you are interacting and talking with them, making sure that they are well and fed and taken care of. But then there may be times that you don't take a phone call because you are busy with your child or busy with your husband. Your family comes first, but you have to find ways to do things that they need or that they like. I mean, your parents, you do, because you've lived with them all these years. So you know that if you were to give them a gift, what they would get. For instance, my dad, he used to love maple syrup. So I always knew that if I bought him maple syrup, that I would make him happy, that he would love it because that's something that he adored. He, after my mom died, my dad did get difficult. He would call me in panic attacks and that sort of thing. And when he was in one of those panic attacks, I couldn't calm him down. I couldn't do anything for him. And I got to the place that I let the phone ring. I just didn't answer if it was him because I couldn't help him. And I couldn't take the burden either. But I would check in on him. I would make sure that he had what he needed. I did as much as I could for him. When he got to the place that he could no longer take care of himself, I made sure that he had what he needed in terms of food and lodging, and someone was caring for him. But I could not do everything he needed emotionally. And that was hard. It was hard on me. And it was definitely hard on him because my mother had passed away. But my first responsibility was to my children, and I was still homeschooling at the time. So it is.
How did you stop the guilt trip?
I told myself that I was doing what I needed to do, and that my children and my husband came first, and that they needed me, and they didn't even live in the same town. My father lived in Chattanooga, which is an hour and a half from me. And so I couldn't be there all the time. He would call me, and when I could talk, I did. But when he was in a panic attack, I just didn't interact because I couldn't fix him. He didn't want me to drive up there, but he wanted me in some fashion that I couldn't do what he wanted. And so I just let him deal with it, because I mean, he had resources at his that were available to him. The funeral home where mother was, they took care of her. They had opportunities for counseling and all that kind of stuff. He had people around him. He did go to church. He had friends. I mean, he had the resources that he could have gotten what he needed. He still had that. I couldn't do it for him because he was an adult. And so I let him take care of his own emotional needs as much as possible. I would check on him and talk to him and love him, but I could not be his daddy.
Yeah. Or his Jesus.
No, I couldn't do that either.
Or his Jesus. I'm rereading a book called Friendish right now. And as I'm reading it for my college girls, it's about friendships. It's about friendships, but I was looking at it and analyzing. I said, you know what? It's about relationships. Sometimes we allow ourselves to be put in the place of Jesus when that is not our place. That's not our place. We can't save anyone.
And in all fairness, when my dad lost my mother, that was probably the worst thing that could have ever happened to him. I acknowledge that. But he was a believer. He had the Lord. And that was a time that he needed to lean on him, not daughter. And I did what I could. But he had to learn. And I think at times he did, because he would tell me that how he would go to the Lord and pray. So I think he did, but I don't think he wanted me to know that at times. He was still very dependent on people around him. But that was a lesson that he needed to learn at that point in his life. And I could not do everything for him. So this is a tough time for everybody in your family and my family at that time.
Yeah, I like
need to realize that.
The sandwich generation, I thought that was very interesting. I've never heard that before. But you know how we advocate so much to pray for our children, to pray for our husbands. We need to also pray for our parents.
We do.
We do. We need to pray for them as much as we pray for our husband and our mom, our kids too. They need our prayers.
Need our prayers.
I think that's the biggest service that we could do for them. But it's also like what you said, controlling what we put in our minds.
Right. And it's a very rough time. And a lot of times when you have to take that parent out of where they're living and put them in assisted living, that's usually a crisis. They usually don't say, okay, I'm ready, now take me. It's usually a crisis. And in my situation, it was my father lost his car, not because someone stole it like he thought, but because he forgot where he parked it. And he had walked to a police station, and the police took him home and later found his car. So it was a crisis. I had to tell him, you can't drive anymore if you're going to lose your car. They're going to charge you for using police time. So I had to put him in an assisted living, and he didn't like that, but it was something he needed. So, difficult things come because you suddenly have to do things that are parent-like for your parent, and it doesn't feel comfortable.
Yeah. This is a tough topic. I wanted it to be a sweet topic, Cynthia, Valentine's. But it's still a very important topic about choosing love.
Love is not always squishy.
No.
Love is sometimes doing what needs to be done. It's not always a squishy feeling.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Well, happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you. Same to you.
I appreciate you so much, Cynthia. Bye.
Bye.